The story begins with a quiet girl standing on the edge of a tall building. Her hair was unevenly cut, and a dark bruise marked her lips as she stared down below. Her eyes were lifeless, showing no trace of the will to live or keep going. She looked over at the sports field and quietly wondered if falling from this height would hurt as much as it does in movies and TV dramas. Earlier, we are introduced to the male protagonist in a distant and cold manner. He was sitting in class, doing nothing, while the voices of chatting students filled the room. He disliked lunch breaks, as they forced him to stay in a room full of cheerful classmates laughing and talking. All he could do was silently watch them with lonely, longing eyes. His favorite way to deal with it was to slip away to a quiet place where no one could reach him, away from others' joy that only reminded him of his own emptiness. Carrying his lunch, he walked out and made his way to the school rooftop, where he felt most at ease. But instead of simply sitting and eating, he would take it further, climbing over the rooftop fence, where even a slight push could send someone falling. With a gust of wind brushing through his hair, he sat down and thought about how his food was now cold and would taste soggy. Deep inside, he reminded himself that this was the farthest he could go, the edge of everything. Yet during this season, he was never entirely alone. A girl from another class would always be there, standing instead of sitting. As she stood motionless, a sudden strong wind swept through the rooftop. He warned her to sit down and be more careful, telling her she could easily fall and die. Upon hearing him, she quietly sits down and gives him a small, respectful bow. Even though they always meet here, this rooftop is the only space they seem to share. He still doesn't know who she truly is, or why she always comes up here like he does. But anyone paying close attention would notice the bruises scattered across her body, clear signs that she was likely bullied. Her hair looked uneven, as if someone had cut it against her will. As the fragile girl began to eat her lunch with a soft blush on her cheeks, there was no doubt she had endured a lot at the hands of her classmates. Noticing his overly focused gaze, she asked if he had something to say or why he was staring at her so intently. Flustered, he tried to play it off by starting a light conversation, pointing out that it was kind of funny they both had the same bento from the school cafeteria. As she heard this, all words left her mouth, and she started to sweat. And in a loud voice, she lowers herself and offers all of her lunch to him. She had thought that he was trying to ask for her lunch, and she was afraid to get hurt. So instinctively, she handed him all her lunch. He panicked to see this and added that he was not trying to extort anything from her and that she should relax and take it easy. As she apologized, a fish-shaped soy sauce bottle slipped from her bento. She tried her hardest to catch it, but despite her effort, the tiny, adorable bottle tumbled off the roof, falling stories below. Believing it might be his fault her soy sauce was lost, she started to cry. Trying to make up for it, he offered her his own, but it too fell and reunited with its twin. Embarrassed, he looked defeated, while the girl couldn't help but let out a small laugh and gave him a bright, beautiful smile. Somehow, the rooftop they both saw as a scary and lonely place became a space where they were slowly getting to know each other, and maybe even growing just a bit closer. But fate doesn't always show mercy to everyone. The boy, too, had been a long-time victim of relentless bullying. His classroom bench was defaced with cruel words, calling him human trash and suggesting he should disappear. As he stared at the graffiti, he realized this kind of treatment had become part of his daily routine. A loud group of boys laughed among themselves nearby, proud of what they seemed to think was a bold move. They teased him and gave him a mocking nickname, Roomba-kun. One of them even threw a bottle at his head. As he quietly cleaned up their mess, they looked on with enjoyment and told him they'd be counting on him to handle tomorrow's cleanup too. While throwing away the trash, he thought that compared to the girl, his own situation still felt slightly safer. Then, something caught his eye. A poster advertising a skydiving event. It claimed the experience would be life-changing, which made him scoff. He tossed the paper away, thinking it was just a waste of time. The next day, both of them faced more bullying. During lunch, they met again and returned to their usual rooftop spot near the edge. This time, the girl handed him a skydiving flyer, the very same one he had tossed before. She told him she got it from someone at the subway station, and that it seemed really interesting to her. He faked a reaction and sarcastically commented that skydiving was just a flashy gimmick meant to grab attention. He added that events like that were perfect for show-off types. As the girl's expression changed and her mood visibly dropped, they both began to share their thoughts. How all that talk about life-changing moments felt more like empty marketing than something real. Suddenly the mood shifted completely, and the girl said that maybe jumping down was easier than she thought, yet she still hadn't done it. Hearing that, he was left speechless. He had believed she was a bit stronger than she appeared, but now it seemed like she was barely holding on to hope. He tried to convince himself she may have misspoken, but he couldn't ignore what she said, that she came up there to die. In a bit of a panic, he asked if she really meant it. She quickly changed the context, saying she was actually talking about skydiving, and how jumping out of a plane didn't seem so scary. She then began to talk about how it might be a wonderful and life-changing thing to try, and that she wanted to give it a shot, maybe even start to change. That evening, as he was getting ready to sleep, he couldn't resist checking the skydiving flyer again. He muttered that it was probably pointless to expect too much from just one small event. He wondered if people were really that simple. Could a single moment truly change everything? The image of her parachuting down and thinking that would fix everything made him chuckle. Considering all the torment she'd faced, messy hair, bruised legs, deep burn marks on her hand, did she really believe that jumping from the sky would erase it all? Yet beneath the laughter, his thoughts were serious. He didn't believe people were that simple. He thought every happy thing gets worn down slowly, over time. Still, he felt a bit sad at the idea of her no longer coming to the rooftop. As he closed his eyes, he reflected on how fast and unpredictable life was. Quietly, he wished for rain on the day of the jump, hoping the plane wouldn't be able to fly. Then came the day of the big jump. The sun was shining brighter than ever, and there wasn't a single sign of rain. A loud man shouted with excitement, declaring that today would be amazing, and introduced himself as Utaka. His bright, energetic aura made the boy feel as if he was the sun itself. He looked to his side, hoping to see the girl, but she was nowhere to be found. The instructor then asked if there was someone named Suzumi present, and finally, we learned the girl's name. Everyone turned in surprise at the sound of heavy footsteps, and there she was, Suzume running toward them, out of breath, apologizing for being late. A visible change had come over her. Her hair was now cut short, and she gave off a completely different vibe. She seemed cheerful, talkative, and full of energy as she tightened her fist and told both herself and him that she was ready for this. The boy had been convinced she wouldn't show up, and was shocked by how much she had changed in just one day. Even her hair, once the oddest part of her appearance, was now entirely transformed. When he asked about it, she responded with a big, bright smile, saying she just felt like switching things up. The boy had never considered change possible for himself, and here she was, someone who had suffered even more, bringing so much positivity to something that could easily be mistaken for a leap toward death. He muttered that he didn't understand people at all. It all seemed meaningless to him. What struck him most was that she had already changed, before even stepping out of the plane. It was obvious he feared being left behind, and he was still far from finding anything that could truly change him. The instructor cheerfully informed everyone that it was time to hand in a few forms before continuing, and told them to put on their ultra-protective suits. While showing off the plane they'd be jumping from, his light-hearted tone and casual attitude didn't quite match the seriousness of what they were about to do. The strangest part was the plane's name, Flyer Penguin Boy. As they started suiting up, he noticed that Suzume seemed completely fine and oddly distant from him. He kept glaring at her, unwilling to accept that she had changed. The instructor sneaked behind him and asked if he could help them in their young puppy love trouble. The instructor was so close to the boy that he panicked and reminded him to maintain his personal space. He told him that he had been staring at her for a long time, and it was obvious that he was in love and that there was some sort of trouble going on between them. With a serious look and a trace of frustration, the boy turned to him and said it was all his fault. He blamed him for hooking Suzumi with the idea of a life-changing experience, one that she misunderstood and now placed too much hope in. He went on to say she had even cut her hair just to force a change in herself. With a worried expression, he said the instructor had made an innocent, struggling girl believe in something that might shatter her expectations before it even began. He felt sorry for her, for what she believed in. Hearing that, the cheerful energy faded from the instructor's face. Calmly, he replied that if the boy truly thought Suzume, or anyone else, was that weak, he was mistaken. In his career, he had seen many people go through heartbreak, overworked employees, stressed exam takers, and all kinds of individuals with personal battles. Looking at him, he said those who choose to jump from such sky-high altitudes are people who have made their resolve already. With a thumbs up, the instructor told him to hurry up, listen to his girlfriend's resolve, understand why she chose to change and jump, and support her instead of questioning the process or outcome. Time passed quickly, and soon it was time to board. Suzume repeated the question the boy asked about her reason to jump. As she paused, he wondered if he had gone too far, or asked something he shouldn't have. But then, she began to share her reasons. She said she wanted to break her attachment to the rooftop once and for all. For most of her life, she had been hit so many times that she became numb to it. The relentless bullying never stopped. Every day, someone would stub a cigarette out on her skin, and her hair became nothing more than a test subject for the bullies to ruin and mock. The weight of it all grew so heavy she found it hard to breathe. Whenever she thought about ending it all, she would come to the rooftop. But taking that final step was always the hardest. She was scared, terrified even. Deep down, she kept thinking that maybe one day she'd do it, but not today. This went on for a long time. She started smiling at the same people who tormented her, pretending everything was fine. On the inside, she was still trapped, too afraid to jump. This prison that she was in for most of her life was so painful and difficult, and she even wondered if this is how all her life would play out. As she looked at him with a hopeful and determined look, she let him know that she wanted to move on. For once in her life, she wanted to get up and muster the courage to do something else. With all her heart and determination in her eyes, she knew she was a loser. But with the hope and desire to change, she was able to overcome the trauma and scars. He stood there, completely stunned, unable to say a single word. He muttered to himself, wondering why he couldn't speak up. The quiet and fragile Suzume he once knew had become someone entirely different. As they boarded the plane, the instructor excitedly told them the experience would be too awesome. He pointed up at the sky and explained how things would work. Once they gave the thumbs down signal, the participants would begin their drop. They had to time it right, since the altitude was over 3,000 meters. He reminded them that each jump had 2 parachutes, and assured them that the instructor would handle everything. Meanwhile, Suzume noticed how silent he had gone and frowned as they suited up. She kept looking at him, waiting, worried. He suddenly burst out, "What about me? Nothing's going to change for me anyway. She was weak like me, someone who once wanted to jump off a roof. But now, the one person I thought understood me is moving on." He started begging her not to change, asking her not to leave him behind in such a cruel world. It was then we realized that part of him came just to see her fail. But now, deep down, he genuinely wanted to support her and see if change was really possible. The plane roared as it climbed higher, and the ground below shrank rapidly. He noticed Suzume trembling from the height. The girl who seemed so strong earlier was struggling now, and he wanted to be there for her. He finally felt a need to speak up. Even though they had spent so much time together, he had never truly gotten to know her. He looked over and saw her quietly repeating, "I can change, over and over." That energy awakened something in him. Letting go of the past, focusing only on supporting her, he suddenly shouted with a shaky voice that he wanted to change too. Tears poured from his eyes, driven by fear of being left behind and his deep loneliness. He cried and told her that he would change too. As she sees this, she smiles and jumps off the plane while telling him, "Let's die together." She disappeared from sight, and now it was his turn. Standing at the edge of the plane, all he could hear was the roar of wind and the spinning propellers. Without saying a word, they dove from the sky-high altitude into the vast, brilliant blue above. As they fell, their bodies looked like tiny insects against the endless sky. The wind was powerful, and fear consumed him. He kept his eyes shut tightly, refusing to look. From behind, the instructor shouted for him to open his eyes so he wouldn't miss the once-in-a-lifetime view. Slowly, he opened them. Before him stretched a vision so breathtaking it felt divine. Sunlight poured over the green landscape below, making it shine, and winding rivers looked like veins through the earth. When the parachute opened, he jolted from the force and gasped for air, catching a look at the world beneath. What the flyer promised was true. The Earth's beauty gripped him completely. Maybe, just maybe, this small act had carved something permanent into his heart. Once on the ground, he felt overwhelming gratitude just from touching the grass, forgetting everything else. Loud yelling caught his attention. Suzume was descending fast, kicking wildly in the air, and the instructor was screaming for her to calm down. She was clearly terrified, yet still enjoying it. When she finally hit the ground, it was with a hard thud. The instructor looked shocked that she made it at all. She seemed exhausted from the fall, but her expression held peace, and the growth she had gone through was written all over her face. They exchanged glances, and he wondered if that dive changed his life. The truth? It didn't. Life continued on. The bullies were still around, and the harassment never stopped. But this time, when one of them told him to clean up their mess, he stood firm. He told the jerk to do it himself. Saying this, he went out, and we see that he still runs away from his life and would go to the roof. As he climbed over the fence, he saw Suzume standing there too. As they started talking, she said she just wanted to visit this place one last time. Alarmed, he yelled at her not to jump. She clarified. What she meant was that when you're standing on the edge, it's easy to think everything's over, that this is the end. But maybe that isn't the case after all. Sitting together, taking things one step at a time, he turned to her and asked if it would be all right to request something. With a stuttering voice, he asked her for her line ID, and she stated that it was a little late for that. They both ended up taking one step forward, and with that their whole world turned colorful.